Hey everybody, guess who I have here today? Steve Sullivan. I'm super excited. Steve actually has been making me laugh, so it's a Friday. I'm not going to cry. Right, Steve? This will be my second Friday.
I guarantee you that'll make you laugh and make you cry today.
I know. And you know what was really making me laugh? He actually created like a presentation, so I don't even have to do anything. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Steve. If you don't know who Steve is, he is an amazing gentleman. He's a 32-year survivor of AML leukemia. You guys heard about CML last Friday with Tim, and they're very good friends, and that's why Tim came out with the leukemia because of Steve. So thank you, Steve. A lot of people are very grateful that you did that and that you helped him with that. So Steve was diagnosed with AML at 23. Now, what's very interesting about this is that his dad was a doctor, and here's a hospital calling his dad going, he has leukemia and he doesn't believe it. And then he calls Steve and says, you have leukemia, accept it. He's like, oh. So he went through chemo and radiation and went into remission. And then at 25, it came back. So it was a 2-year hiatus after chemo and radiation. So Steve is very resilient in overcoming leukemia. And he had to get blood transfusions. They're actually platelets. And he came down with hepatitis C. He'll tell you about that in a little bit here. But he's so much more than his illness. He's kicked out the door. He's kicked it out the door. I love that. He's a fighter and an overcomer. I totally believe that. He's also an author and storyteller. Some people know that he has. Do you have a book out right now, or is it waiting to come out? You're waiting for it to come out?
Yes.
Yes. And he's a coach. So if you guys need some uplifting help with anything that you're going through, hire him. These are all the information is down there. So he's amazing. He's amazing. He's going to tell you how he figured out that he didn't figure out, how the doctors figured out that he did have hep-C. That's pretty much, I think, kicked out the door. He's going to talk to you about that. And he's also going to talk to you about his 7 lives. Right?
Yes.
Yes. So, hey, Steve, would you like to tell them everything else about your wonderful life that you have right now?
Hey, you were doing such a great job there. It's like you can keep on going on for the next half an hour. I'll just sit here and be quiet.
You are an author and a coach and a storyteller. You're pretty good with the stories, too.
Yes. I love telling stories.
Yeah.
Of which I'm going to tell one today. Or maybe several, in fact.
Yeah.
But we titled this session, How to Have 9 Lives, of which some people have been asking the question of, what do you mean? How do you have 9 lives?
Yeah.
And I've said, I'm on my 5th life. And people have said, what do you mean you're on your 5th life? Well, the whole concept of 9 lives comes from what? Cats. So to Nancy out there, the cat lover in the group.
Well, speaking of that really quick, Nancy said that she donates platelets, but probably not for her cat.
I hope not.
Right, Nancy? But she says that she loves both of us. Don't make me cry, Nancy.
So I want to use the metaphor of a cat today to talk about overcoming challenges and landing on our feet. Because the root cause behind the whole idea that cats have 9 lives is because they always land on their feet. Mm-hmm. They may fall from incredible heights, 150 feet up, things that would kill most things, but their ability to adjust in the air and to land helps them survive that. Mm-hmm. And so cats do this, squirrels do this too. When they're flying through the air, they pivot their head in a way till they find the ground. They see the ground. And when they see the ground, then they pivot their upper body so that their feet are facing the ground. And then they pivot their hind quarter so that their hind feet are facing the ground. And then they kind of stretch out their arms a little bit to catch air kind of like a wingman flying through the sky to try and help slow down their process to the ground. But then when they hit the ground, they hit it with their claws out so they can grab the ground and keeps them from slipping. And their back then gives and comes back up. They bounce forward and they go running off happy as ever can be, living what would be something that would kill just about everybody else, including us, if we fell from that type of height.
Right. By the way, Nancy, so you're just calling yourself a crazy cat lady. Okay.
She is.
Yeah.
You didn't know she was a crazy cat lady? She definitely is.
Now, I don't have a cat right now, so you won't see the tail. Going closer.
But anyway, if you want to see the science behind this, you can Google it, and why cats land on their feet or squirrels. You'll see the same thing with their acrobatic abilities. And why do I share that? I share that because, to me, the fact that cats, squirrels can do this is an innate ability that they have from a very young age. Kittens as young as 7-8 weeks show the same ability to land on their feet when growing up in the air. That ability represents, in my mind, the mindsets that we need to have as human beings to face the challenges in our own life. So that as we face those challenges like a cat, we have that internal mindset to see that we can land in a way to keep on living, keep on moving forward. And so what I want to share with you today are stories out of my life of where I learned 3 critical mindsets to help me land on my feet and keep going that you might be able to use in your trials and situations to land on your feet. And so the first situation, Nancy or Jenny, as you mentioned, I was diagnosed with leukemia. Once I heard that I had leukemia, had cancer, the first thought was, I'm going to die. Not necessarily today, but likely within 2 years.
Right. I
started evaluating my life, and I was thankful for the life I'd had. So mindset number 1 in landing on your feet is learning how to have gratitude for what you have and not focus on what you may be losing.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to ask you about this because I was wondering what your mindset was like that enabled you to be resilient through these trials. I mean, because it came back. And did you tell your children? Because I believe you did. Right?
I did later.
How'd that work?
At that time, my sons were, when I was first diagnosed, they were under the age of 2. My oldest son turned 2 and my youngest son turned 1 while I was in the hospital. So they didn't really know what was going on. But your question is a good one in terms of what are those mindsets? And there were several mindsets that I developed to help me face that challenge and the other challenges that have been in my life. And so the first is certainly being thankful and that gratitude and understanding what you do have and not what you're losing. Now, the second mindset was to accept the situation and deal with it head on. Many people in my situation at 23 with a wife and 2 kids, they would be asking themselves, why me? This is not fair. I never asked why me. And in fact, I turned the question around to ask, why not me? Is there anything special about me that I should have a trouble-free life and not experience, any distress. And I came to the conclusion there's absolutely nothing special to
I
keep
was
me.
going to ask you, did you wrestle with, why is this happening to me? I mean, you were 23.
Mhm.
You're living a great life, right?
The bottom line is I didn't wrestle with that.
Mhm.
I accepted the fact that this could happen to anybody. And it was happening to me. So that is my second mindset, was to accept that situation.
Yeah.
And by accepting the situation, it allowed me to focus my energy on the problem instead of feeling sorry for myself or embracing a victim mentality like,
Right.
this is not fair. Because you can use your energy for negative thoughts, which in many ways could hinder you actually achieving healing.
Exactly.
Or you could use your energy for positive thoughts, which would lift you up, strengthen you, and potentially help you overcome the sickness.
Yes.
So that's mindset number 2.
And actually, Nancy is saying that your points are very important, Steve Sullivan. Mindset is everything. And she said, incredible mindset, especially at 23. And you were married at that time, right? And you had two children, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I was a very young man striking out. Had many dreams that got radically changed by the fact that I had leukemia.
Right. I don't think your dad was going to let you live in that mindset either. Right?
Well, my dad was very good at supporting me, but he didn't tell me what to do. He didn't try to say you need to do this or handle it this way. He potentially could have said more, but he took a different approach, almost a physician approach of, okay, what is the information my son needs? I'll get it for him.
Right.
And so that was the greatest blessing my father was to me as a physician. I mean, because I'm sure he knew the disease and the effects of the disease, and probably was more fearful than most other people might be with a family member with leukemia.
Right. Because he knew what could happen, but he was still trying, I believe, from our conversations, he was trying to keep a positive mindset for you, right? But he knew.
He did. He also respected my abilities
to
make decisions. And so he would feed me information, which was very important later on in the decisions that I made regarding future treatment.
Right.
Which I probably won't go into unless you ask. But
I think we talked about that. I'm like, is that your trigger? You're like, nope, ask. So my question for you is, when you found out that leukemia came back, how was that handled by your family and your kids? When did your son say to you, Dad, I thought you were only going to live for 10 years? Was that after the second time?
That was a long time ago. And I don't know, Tim, if I told you this, but yeah, it's at a young age, I let my kids know that I was sick. And I also, and now to my regret, would tell them that I might not live very long. And I did that because I wanted them to embrace the moment. Right. To say, hey, this is the time I've got with my dad. I may not have any more time.
Right.
And after about probably 10 years of listening to that story from me, my older sons who were teenagers said, shut up, Dad. You're going to live for another 10 years. And sure enough, they were right. I have, and many more.
Exactly. So Steve, so Nancy was writing that she was giving platelets for a woman that had cancer. I think I read that correctly. But she's still giving platelets. So
thank you very much, Nancy. That's a gift of life to that person, because one of the big differences, and what Tim went through in a chronic version versus what I went through in an acute version is I got intensive chemotherapy. In fact, the chemotherapy was so acidic, the nurses had to put on rubber gloves to administer it into my veins.
Yes.
And my dad used to joke with me that it would have been better for my body for them to pour Drano in than the chemotherapy they gave me. Drano, in other words, the Drano would do less damage.
Hashtag Drano. We don't need you to sponsor us, but that's okay. Right.
But anyway, that chemotherapy was designed to destroy my bone marrow to within just to use a colloquial term, an inch of life.
Yes.
Such a speck. It's like destroyed 99.9% of my bone marrow, if not more, in the hopes that it doesn't destroy it all.
Right.
But it destroys it back to such a small percentage that your body can recover from that. And so I had those types of rounds of chemotherapy. Now,
is that your third life?
No, we're still in my second life at that point in time. But yeah, it when that ended, I'm on third life in the second round of chemotherapy. Yeah. So for those of you that are wondering and counting the 5, yes, first life was up till I was diagnosed with leukemia, which nearly killed me. I beat that through treatment, so to speak, and achieved remission and started my second life. And then I relapsed into leukemia and had, ended the second life and successfully recovered from that treatment to start my third life. And we'll get on to the other ones. But
by the way, quickly, Nancy's asking if you had stem cells, a stem cell replacement.
I did not. That is very common practice today.
Yeah.
And it's often referred to as a bone marrow transplant.
Yeah.
And I was treated in 1986 to 1988. That's how long ago it was. Mm-hmm. And during that period of time, they were experimenting with stem cells. They were experimenting with unrelated donors, but it wasn't common practice. And so the only 2 options I had for a transplant were an autologous, which is they take my bone marrow out, they give me total body irradiation, destroy my bone marrow altogether, pump in my own bone marrow, it rebuilds. The good thing about it is your body's not going to reject it because it's yours. But the bad thing about it is because the cancer is in your bone marrow, there's a good chance you're going to get the cancer back, or the cancer would come back.
Yes.
And then the other option was a sibling transplant. Back then, ideally, it was like a twin, but they were exploring how to use close matches. And so I had an older sister, and we had her tested. And at that time, they looked at 5 markers in the blood to determine compatibility. My sister came back 3 of 5. So they classified her as a secondary match. And the leading health institution who was doing those types of transplants encouraged me, go forward and do this. And this is where my father came in and was a big help, because he went to the medical libraries back when people only had libraries to get their information. And most people couldn't get into a medical library to get access to articles, things that are now online that you could Google and probably find.
Yeah.
And he would photocopy them, he'd bring them to me, and I'd read them.
Right.
And they're very scientific, but I learned very quickly that any person can basically get the gist of what they're trying as far as the treatment.
Mhm.
You don't have to understand all the technical stuff regarding the treatment, and then you can look at what they're trying to do and what the results are. And those results, from what I read about transplants, Nancy, told me that autologous transplants for people with AML weren't very effective. You would potentially relapse. They give you another transplant, relapse, give you another transplant, and you might have several transplants before you pass in like 36 months. Reading that material, I also found out that secondary matches, like with my sister, had a high risk of bone marrow rejection, host versus graft disease. And host versus graft disease has to be one of the worst ways to die, because your body has received this bone marrow, which is all through your body, starts to reject it. So your body starts to flare up, becomes super red, sensitive, sore, painful, until you pass.
Yeah. And he did not tell me all this. We talked about a lot, but he did not get here. Don't make me pull out the bacon. I have bacon. If I start to cry, I'm going to pull out the bacon go.
Well, Nancy asked, so.
I know, Nancy. Thank you. But guess who's here? Brian's here too. So
yes, hi, Brian.
That the two of us are looking wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, but you're really looking wonderful, Steve.
No, I would say you're beauty, I'm the beast, but hey, we'll compliment each other.
Thank you. It's very nice.
So back to the question of a transplant. And I tell people today that when I share my story is, don't do what I did. Do your own research, make your own decisions. Don't say, well, hey, Steve did this, it worked for him, I'm going to do it too. No. What I did ultimately, after I looked at both scenarios, I went to the opposite doctor, because it was like two health systems. One physician advocating for an autologous, one advocating for the sibling. And I said to the autologous doctor, what do you think of the secondary match transplant? And he told me it has a high risk of rejection and he wouldn't do it. So I went to the secondary match guy, asked him and said, what do you think about an autologous transplant? He said, you're likely to relapse and die from the disease anyway, so I wouldn't do it. So both of these medical experts basically nullified the other one, but they also confirmed what I found in the literature. And so then with that information, I went back to my oncologist and asked this question. To receive a bone marrow transplant, you have to be in remission first. And so I asked him, I said, if I should survive 5 years after a transplant, was it the transplant or the remission that I got into before the transplant that cured me? And he said, we wouldn't know, we can't tell. All we know is that chemotherapy is not very effective for treating leukemia, or at least my leukemia. Because back then I was looking at initially like a 22% survival rate in 5 years. So 1 out of 5 people lived 5 years after.
How did your family handle that?
They were from a medical family, so they handled it quite well. They understood medicine. They understood statistics. I mean, I never took those statistics and said, oh, I'm going to die because these are so terrible. Exactly. In fact, when I relapsed, they got worse. I mean, the fact I relapsed, the doctor came back and said, you got 5% chance to be alive in a year, because they expected me to relapse again. So Nancy, to answer your question, I chose not to have a bone marrow transplant at all.
Right. Right.
And I've kind of watched over time, and there's been people like me who chose not to do a bone marrow transplant. And there's people who've chosen to do a bone marrow transplant in a similar situation as what I had. And the results are pretty much equal. So I went against medical advice, so to speak, Nancy, and didn't have a transplant because that's what they were encouraging me to do. Now, again, I say that because at the time, there were not unrelated donor banks like there are today. If somebody in my situation today, they could go out to the unrelated donor bank and see if there's a potential match. And in that case, usually they're looking at 10 blood markers, and they want 9 out of 10 to match. And in that type of scenario, they've had fairly good results. And so, if I had to face it today, I would possibly have an unrelated donor bone marrow transplant, but that wasn't available, so I went forward. But even up to, I think it was 3 years later, I met a physician, and when asking me about it, did you go through a transplant? I said no. She was like, you need to go through a transplant. I'm like, I haven't relapsed in 3 years. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. And Steve, not to bring in humor at all, but every time you say, I had to go to the library and research it, I'm like, oh, it's a Dewey Decimal System, which kids would have no idea what that is anymore. Our parents would, we would, but you're going through the whole thing, trying to figure out the books that you should look at. And I really respect you for doing that, even though your father and probably your wife at the time, they may have been trying to do that too. I know your father was. So,
okay. So Nancy's got a question up there. Did I undergo the same treatment the first and second time? No.
Right.
The first time I went through a standard set of treatment that they still pretty much use today, the same chemotherapy drugs. And when I relapsed, they said they had just come up with a new chemotherapy drug called high-dose Aricea, which is commonly used today. And it was considered to be potentially more effective, maybe more potent, I don't know. But the second time around, I only had high-dose Aricea, so I had a different chemotherapy regimen. And I only had, first time around, they took me through 3 treatments. In other words, they would induce the remission and they come back and I do the whole thing over again to maintenance it up to 3 times. The second time, I just did the one and walked out the door. But I have, in reading about it today, I know places that would take that high-dose Aricea and do multiple scenarios today. So anyway.
You're here. The point is you're here, right? And
yes, that's
never come with us.
Okay, absolutely. So moving on to the third and final mindset that I want to pass on to people, because this is by far the most important one. When I realized that I might not see another day, I had to come to grips with the fact that I had today. And so I started to ask myself, how can I live fully today? How can I make the most of today? Not live for 10 years down the road, not live for retirement. All those things went out the mind. I mean, that's not something that you think of anymore because you don't know if you'll be there tomorrow. And so I adopted a mindset that I call embrace today. And there's 3 parts to that. that I've implemented into my life. The first is being aware of where you are, your, nature, the people that are around you, what's happening, and stop and take it in. Appreciate it. So if you see a flower next to the sidewalk, smell it. If you hear a musician on the corner playing, stop and listen to the music. Because in my own mind, it was like, this might be the last time I hear a musician, last time I smell a flower. So I better make sure I don't just pass these opportunities up, but make the most of each and every opportunity that's given me. The second part to embrace today was to create memories with others.
Yeah.
You can live so many so-so days and they're meaningless. But if you can do things with people that create special moments and create those memories, that brings about life in a powerful way, not only for you, but for the person who's participating. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that know me on LinkedIn and have seen me operate, collaboration is one of the big things I'm all about.
Yeah.
And that stems from the second point here, the desire to make memories and create those memories and to do so with others. And so, going on Brian's show with red hair and being seen as a guy with red hair, that's a memory. That's that everybody can laugh at. Working with Rob House to create some creative videos like the smile video that we did, and we did a fitness video, same thing. Those are special things.
Yes.
The third part to embrace today, and possibly the most important one, is make sure that the people you love in your life know that you love them and that they are valued by you. Because you don't know if you've got tomorrow. So you want to make sure they know it today. And in saying that, and living that out, the greatest compliment that I've ever received was from my daughter, who's in college. And while she was at school, she said to me, "Dad, not a day has gone by where I've had to question your love for me. I know that you love me." Mm-hmm. And as a father, that melted my heart.
Exactly.
So again, learn when you can to embrace today. Because if you can live fully for one day, I learned that was good enough. Just to live one day fully, as opposed to 10,000 so-so days. They don't compare.
It's true.
And fortunately for me, I've had numerous good days since being diagnosed with leukemia, even though I've had to go through other battles.
I was going to say, are we moving on to the fourth?
We can move on to the fourth.
Is that 3 or 4? There's another life.
Yeah, birth is the first life that we all have, right?
Yeah.
Going through chemo the first time that nearly killed me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gave me a second life. Facing leukemia again a third time with a death sentence moved me on to my third life. And then, as you mentioned, out of the numerous blood transfusions I got, one of
platelets, though. So just so people know, there's different types, and they weren't able to test the blood like they do now.
Correct. So,
and I'm not a doctor or a nurse, either is Steve, but we just want to let you guys know this because we are. Well, I'm not, but Steve's putting out there a lot of medical information. So
exactly.
I don't think your dad's around anymore, is he? We get him. Okay.
So, yes, I mean, the bottom line is for an acute myelogenous leukemia patient, when they're going through that chemotherapy time and their bone marrow is down to nothing, before it recovers, which could be 3 to 6 weeks, your bone marrow is not producing white blood cells, platelets, or red blood cells. And those cells only live for a matter of days in your body. You have to keep generating them. So to keep me alive, I had to get numerous blood transfusions until my bone marrow bounced back and started creating the cells that I needed again.
Right.
Most of the time that was platelets because they burn up the fastest. But sometimes it was a full transfusion to get the red blood cells, white blood cells, all that. But again, in one of those, I got hepatitis C, which I didn't realize at the time.
Everybody knows this is what I was talking about. They weren't testing for hep-C because they didn't know about hep-C. What Steve told me is that they knew there might be something else out there other than A and B, but at that time they didn't know about hep-C. So anyways, sorry to interrupt you. Steve, I just want people to know, because at this point people might go, well, then I don't want to get platelets and I don't want to get blood transfusions if I have leukemia, lymphoma, or leukemia.
Again,
yeah.
You know, when I was going through it, HIV was the big question, the big scare.
Yeah.
You know, fortunately they had tests for it, so that the blood supplies were supposed to be protected. But even then, you know, it's life or death. If you don't take the blood, you're going to die. So again, it's like if you get a virus, you might live longer, and yeah, maybe the virus kills you. So,
Right.
Which is unfortunate. And that's exactly what happened to me in terms of getting hepatitis C, and it turned into chronic hepatitis C. And I didn't find out about it until about 8 years, I think, after my last treatment. They had finally developed a test and identified hepatitis C. And so I went in for some testing. Periodically, I think 2 or 3 times after my last treatment, I would go in for blood testing and say, okay, let's test for HIV, let's test for hepatitis, let's test for whatever they can test for,
Right.
just to make sure that I was clear. And yeah, it was during one of those testing things that they came back and said, you got hepatitis C.
Now, but you started getting, I don't know how to say the word. You were struggling with it too. It started with an A. Where's that word? Where you're swelling and your legs were swelling, right?
Ascites.
Ascites.
So yeah, for many, many years, the hepatitis C just festered there without any real impact upon me. I went through several treatments for it to try and knock it out. The fourth one that I finally went through actually did knock it out. So in that sense, defeating hepatitis, you know, is like the end of life 3 and maybe the life 4.
Right.
But during that point, when my liver was so bad, yeah, things like ascites started coming on, which your body swells up with water. If you don't get rid of it, your lungs can't carry it, and it can become very serious.
Right.
But they have good medicine for that, so it never really caused a crisis for me. It just means I've got the potential to add a lot of water weight fast and get rid of it. And when I say fast, if I go off my meds in a week, I'll gain 20 pounds of water.
Wow.
And if I go back on my meds, usually about 3 weeks later, I will have slowly gotten all those 20 pounds of water off. So I can yo-yo big time in terms of my weight. But one of those signs of my liver getting bad was basically a buildup of ammonia in my system. We did not realize it. We only discovered it because of me going through a mental loss. All I can explain is there's 5 hours of my life where I was doing something that I have no recollection of. It started, I can remember getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning because the plan was to take my wife and her cousin to the airport to fly to see my wife's sister.
Now let's let people know that you're going to O'Hare. So it's not like they were going to the airport in Kansas or something.
Yeah, exactly.
O'Hare Airport is huge.
Huge. Right? Yeah, one of the largest airports or busiest airports here in the States, with big highways leading into it and around it. And so I learned later from my wife that I looked so sick to her that she chose to drive to the airport. So she picked up her cousin, she drove to the airport, and I was just the passenger. And I don't recall any of that. And then when they got their stuff to go in, I apparently got up out of my seat, went around and got into the driver's seat. Don't recall that at all. My wife said she had to tell me 3 times to go. It's like I was just there and not knowing what to do. And finally, the 3rd time she said go, I drove off. And I probably, looking at the map, I drove the freeways of Chicago about 50 miles to the southwest of Chicago into a city I'd never visited before in Chicagoland, because there's a ton of little cities. But it was all major highway, all at 7 a.m. on a weekday, which would be high prime time rush hour. Lots and lots of cars. And somehow, by the grace of God, I made it all the way there and didn't have a wreck. The point at which I started to remember again, is a woman had come and knocked on my window because I was in a car in this parking lot, which I think was kind of like a preschool.
Now imagine this. If someone comes up, knocks on his window, it's kind of like, so what are you doing in the preschool parking lot looking at these kids?
Yeah, actually.
What happened after that?
That could be. But, then I got out of my car to talk to her, and I talked to her a little bit. And I'm sure I didn't realize it at the time, but her probably just looking at me scared her. She went in, and 5 minutes later, 3 cop cars came running out. And the cops are starting to talk to me like, sir, how much have you had to drink? Sir, how have you? And I'm like, I did not know how I ended up there. I did not have a good answer for that. I knew that, one, I hadn't drank because of my liver and cirrhosis. It's like, stay off of liquor. Whether they believe that or not is another thing, because one of the things the officer said is why did you throw up on yourself? And I looked and I had vomit down my shirt that I did not realize was there, that I must have thrown up in the car at some point in time.
Wow.
No recollection of it whatsoever.
You didn't tell me that.
And he put me through sobriety tests, which I passed with flying colors. And then I kind of, as he questioned me, I said, sir, this might have something to do with my liver because I've got cirrhosis. So he looked in my eyes and he said, yeah, I can see yellow in your eyes. Wow. So they called the ambulance. The ambulance came, checked me out. And they took me.
Did you even know your name at that point?
Yeah, at that point in time, I was mentally functioning, because in the ambulance, they ask you those type of questions like, what day of the week is it? Who's the president? What year is it? Those kind of things. And I was able to answer all those questions. When they took me to the hospital, they discovered I had an abnormally high level of ammonia in my blood system. The cirrhosis had led to me not being able to process that out effectively. And it was leading to what they call hepatic encephalopathy or whatever. I know I'm not pronouncing it right, but they call it HE sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like meningitis. It's it affects your brain in a way that if left untreated in terms of pneumonia, it would send me into coma and would kill me. So that's the end of one life. So whether that's
Is that 4?
life 3 or life 4, don't know. But
He's still here. He's still
I'm
here.
on my 5th life. I did, as a result of that event, though, they did send me downtown for a liver transplant assessment, which is like a day. You spend a day with a bunch of doctors. I think they took like 27 vials of blood. It's like, are you leaving any blood in me whatsoever? And they came back to me and said, Steve, you qualify for the liver transplant list, to go on the list if you want to, but you're not sick enough to probably get a liver.
Wow.
You have to get a lot sicker, Steve, and get higher on the list to get a liver. But they said, hey, the good news is there's a new drug out that's been more effective in knocking out hepatitis C. Look, we're going to put you on that and see what happens. So they put me on that, and that effectively knocked the hepatitis C out. And the great thing about that is once I got over that treatment in that period, I felt like I was 10 years younger. It really made a big difference from where I was to where I am today, as far as energy and not feeling fatigued. So I know there were some questions in there that we blew by. Tim, you had one. I don't remember what it was.
I think you're just glad that you're still alive. Well, you actually.
Tim asked if I had any regrets.
Right. He did.
I always
didn't even answer that kind of. That's why I didn't say anything.
I'm not sure I would say I had any regrets. I would say that, as I approach, another mindset, 4th mindset, if you want, today, if you guys are taking notes. When I look and go through these tough situations, I'm always asking, what can I learn from it? And by turning it into a learning opportunity, that helps me value what's happening. Even though I wouldn't wish it on anybody else, even though it might be a very terrible thing to go through, the reality is I've learned things that I could not have learned otherwise. And I'm very appreciative of those learnings. And so from that standpoint, I don't have any regrets. Now, if you want to know one regret, and this is not uncommon to people who go through serious illness or cancers, after that second leukemia treatment, where doctors told me I might not be alive in a year, they also told my wife to prepare for my death. And so she mentally distanced herself. She sought support. She eventually ended up in a relationship with another guy, and that consequently destroyed our family. So I regret the destruction of my family as kind of a byproduct of what happened.
But what people need to know, though, is that you're remarried. The second wife, though, isn't she the one that drove herself and you and your sister?
Yes, exactly. And she and I just celebrated 27 years together.
Yeah. Yes. Congratulations on that. So does anybody else have any questions? before we go? I don't think we missed anybody else. Nancy asked a couple things, but you answered those before. You answered them as she was typing them, I think. She was asking about your second treatments and things like that. But Steve has a very interesting story. And if anybody has any questions for him, I think it's worth it to reach out to him and speak with him, because he actually...
if you're going through cancer or any other life-challenging thing,
right,
don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'll see what I can do to encourage you. If you feel like you need, kind of mentoring through that, I can be a coach, an effective coach, life coach from that standpoint.
Mm.
But again, as we close up, I want to reiterate those 4 mindsets that I mentioned today. The first being, have gratitude. Focus on what you've got, not what you're losing. Second, accept the situation. Don't waste energy mentally trying to say, this is not fair, this is not me. Don't fall in the victim mentality. Accept it and say, okay, what can I do? The third is, and this would be true of anybody, whether you're going through cancer or anything, embrace today. Make sure you're enjoying the world around you, you're making memories, and you're loving the people in your life. And then the bonus one that we talked about at the end, and now I just lost it mentally.
Don't ask the slime brain. I'm just kidding. I did not see his PowerPoint presentation.
The bonus one isn't on the PowerPoint. Otherwise, I refer back to it. No.
I know, right? That was, let everybody know that you love them.
That was part of embrace
to its fullest.
Oh, the bonus one was, look at every situation as an opportunity to learn.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I am not taking notes right now because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing information, actually.
But I commend you, Jenny. You did not cry today. I thought for sure you would cry.
I had the bacon. And I knew if I pulled out the bacon, that I might get up. Jenny, this is a serious conversation. That would be Ryan Schulman. That would have been like, no, this is a serious conversation. So, but it is, and I didn't cry today because I love you. I'm very grateful. I was very honored that you actually texted me and said, hey, you know what? You want to have me on your show? I was like, absolutely. So, because you've been on so many shows and you just told lots of people your story. And if I could bring anything else out or have you tell anything else out, like bring anything else out, have you tell anything that you haven't told other people, I absolutely wanted you to do that because it's important. It's a very important, and it's not easy. It's not easy for people to come out and tell people their stories because sometimes they don't want everybody to know, right? I mean, that's just what it is. Sometimes you just need to talk about it. And
I think that's where looking at it as a learning opportunity gives you the ability to say, hey, this happened to me, and it's a platform from which I can speak and I can voice a message for people that are in a similar boat who are afraid to speak up. You can be a voice for them. So I always encourage people to tell their stories.
And you guys are making me want to not want to, but need to tell everybody my full story at some point. I'm getting there. But honestly, Steve, this is my story. Everybody likes to say, oh, my story isn't as bad as your story, but I don't feel like mine is as bad as yours, I guess. But maybe it is.
I understand that, and I learned long ago when I talked to other people with cancer.
Yeah.
If you start comparing prognosis, there's cancers that are 90% curable versus 22% curable. Yeah. And you could say, wow, you got a bad one, you got a good one. No, I never do that because I realize that until I've walked in the other person's shoes,
exactly,
I don't know what they're going through.
Exactly.
And it could be far worse than anything I ever went through. So in many ways, I cringe for those people,
Yeah,
and don't assume that, hey, I know what they're going through.
it's true. Actually, before we go, why don't you tell people about your coming soon stories about, there's a book coming out called Apples and Oranges on Your Team, Bite-Sized Stories for Life-Giving Leadership.
Yes. So it's looking more like September now.
Okay.
But yes, Apples and Oranges on Your Team, Bite-Sized Stories for Life-Giving Leadership is a compilation of 30 plus stories, short stories. That's why they're bite-sized stories that convey messages in almost a parable type of format that hopefully cause you to reflect. Those who have read them feel like, yeah, it promotes good reflection, and all the stories that are in there are not going to touch you as a person, but there may be, a half dozen or more stories that really hit home to you and what you're going through to help you personally, and especially if you're in a leadership role. These stories are designed to show you how to interact with your staff in a supportive way, in a life-giving way, so that they can become the best that they can be, and consequently become the most productive they can be.
This is coming from an IT guy.
Yeah, from an IT.
Right? An IT guy. But you're a great IT guy. Anyway, does anybody else have any questions before we go? For Steve or me? It's about Steve, though. This show is about Steve. So, but I want everybody to know.
I'm supposed to make this show about you. You know that?
We should name it about me. Well, it's already Jenny's gold standard. I mean, come on. But it's a podcast, not podcast. And you just want to be on here to have me say, do you have a podcast, not podcast? I'm like, yeah, I do. So, but you can touch with Steve on LinkedIn. So
that's the best way to reach me. Yes, definitely.
So all the information is down here. But please reach out to him if it's about you or a family member or friends regarding leukemia. And it's cancer. Oh any Steve, I almost forgot. It's Cancer Awareness Month this month. So please donate if you guys have any extra money right now to donate to the Leukemia Lymphoma Foundation or Leukemia Lymphoma Society.
Yeah.
Right.
LLS. Yeah.
LLS.org.
Yeah.
Correct. And but any types of cancer, please think about donating. It doesn't matter if it's this month or not, but
and if you can't donate money, like Nancy mentioned earlier, donate blood. I mean, right. As a leukemia survivor, I needed blood more than I needed money.
Right.
And this, because of COVID, this has been a hard time for the bone or the blood donation centers to collect blood.
Right. Yeah. So please consider that because there's so many people out there that need your help. And also contact the different cancer foundations or societies to see how you can help them also. Because sometimes, or if you are in need of money yourself, some of them actually have money that they can give to you, or I don't know how that works, but I know that Tim receives.
The Leukemia Lymphoma Society did that too for needy families dealing with leukemia. They were able to help pay for some bills.
Right.
Not a whole lot, but some.
But what did you say? What did you say on that one video that you made for Tim before he came on? You said one pill you felt like when you swallowed it, you were swallowing an iPad. It was that expensive. Exactly. And that was a long time ago because iPads aren't that expensive now. But back then they were probably $1,000 or $900.
Yeah, it's probably about 10 years ago. And that was not a treatment for my leukemia. That was a treatment for my hepatitis C. But
But yeah, even for hep-C, if you guys can donate for that, that'd be amazing too. So thank you. And thank you so much, Steve. I so appreciate you being on my show today. and
Thank
all the
you,
other people that
Jenny.
have been in the
Thank
comments.
you, Jenny, very much for sharing your platform with me.
You're
And
welcome.
I hope I've been able to bring some value to the
Yeah.
people that follow you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. So this will be on this will be on replay on Facebook, on my personal page, on Jenny's Gold Standard, Jenny's Gold Standard on YouTube, and we'll upload it onto LinkedIn. They haven't cut us off yet.
All right.
Anyway,
Watch
guys,
the
have a great
people.
day.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.